I wasn't trying to be dramatic that night. Honestly, I just wanted to do something nice. Ethan had been so distant lately. Distracted, short-tempered, barely present. I kept telling myself it was just stress, that work had him pulled in every direction. So, I thought, why not surprise him with his favorite dinner? Braised lamb, rosemary potatoes. That wine he always pretended not to love. Just something that might soften the silence growing between us. I grabbed his car keys without thinking twice. My own car was low on gas, and his was right there. The light outside was warm and golden, that peaceful time of day when the world feels half asleep. I slipped into the driver's seat, humming to myself, and leaned over to the glove compartment. I just needed napkins, that's it. But when I opened it, something caught my eye. And everything shifted in an instant. It was a lipstick. Deep red, sleek tube. Not mine. I don't wear red, haven't since college. My heart didn't race, my face didn't flush. No, it was colder than that, like my blood forgot how to move. I turned it over in my hand, almost curious. It looked expensive. Not the drugstore kind. This could mean nothing, I told myself. It could be anything. But something in me had already started unraveling, and I knew. I had to look closer. I sat there for a moment, just staring at it. The tube felt heavier than it should have, like it was carrying some kind of truth I wasn't ready to hold. I turned it slowly, examining the bottom for a clue. The shade was called Scarlet Spell. Cute. Bold. Definitely not me. I don't flirt with colors like that. And Ethan? He would have never bought something like this for me. He's never even noticed when I change my hair. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just placed it gently on the passenger seat, like it might explode if I moved too fast. My hands shook a little as I started the engine. The drive to the store felt longer than usual. Every red light a chance to second-guess what I'd found. It doesn't mean anything yet, I kept repeating. But deep down, something ancient in me had already stirred awake. A kind of knowing only women carry in their bones. By the time I reached the parking lot, I had made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to accuse him. Not yet. If there was something to uncover, I'd find it, without him knowing I was looking. I've seen what happens when women confront too soon. They get gaslit, dismissed, made to feel crazy. No, I was going to stay calm, controlled, smiling even. And if he was lying to me, then he had no idea who he was dealing with. I walked through those store aisles like nothing was wrong. Tomatoes, garlic, rosemary, each item dropped into the basket like clockwork. But inside, my mind was weaving a web, replaying conversations, scanning for inconsistencies. I thought back to last Tuesday when he said he was working late, and how he came home smelling different. Not bad, just not like me. A scent I couldn't name, but now I wondered if it had a matching lipstick. At checkout, I smiled at the cashier, waved goodbye. On the surface, I was the same woman I'd always been, warm, patient, devoted, but something had shifted, quietly but permanently. That lipstick had cracked open a door I didn't even know existed. And whatever was behind it, I was ready to face it, on my terms. By the time I got home, Ethan was already back, in the shower, humming like nothing in the world could touch him. I placed the groceries on the counter, slow and deliberate, and pulled the lipstick from my purse. I turned it in my hand one more time, then tucked it in the drawer beneath the sink. It wasn't time to ask questions yet. No, first I needed answers. And I had a feeling they were closer than he thought. That night, while he showered, I moved like a ghost through the house. Quiet, unbothered, focused. I opened the bathroom drawer where I'd hidden it. The lipstick. I studied it under the warm kitchen light this time, like a detective studying a clue. The brand was luxury, high-end, the kind of thing someone wears when she wants to be noticed. And then I saw it. Tiny, elegant letters engraved on the gold rim. AM. My pulse quickened, but I stayed calm. Initials, I thought. Not mine, not anyone I knew, but maybe his, maybe hers. I turned it over again and again, like it might whisper something if I stared long enough. I thought about asking him right then, catching him off guard. But that's not how this would go. I needed more than a hunch. I needed proof. The kind you can't wiggle out of with lies or charm. The next morning, I kissed him on the cheek and wished him a good day. I packed his lunch, just like always. He smiled, said thank you, called me sweetheart, the usual script. But I noticed the new cologne. Not the one I gave him last Christmas. This one was sharper, muskier, seductive almost. I watched him leave like I always did, waving from the porch. But this time, I wasn't sending him off with love. I was sending him off with a question. Over the next few days, I became someone else entirely. Still me, but sharper, more alert. Like a hawk watching the ground for movement. I started paying attention to everything. The way he locked his phone screen when I walked by. How he flinched slightly when I mentioned plans for the weekend. And then came the shirt. A white button-down I was folding in the laundry room. Right on the collar, barely there. A soft smear of red. I held it close to the lipstick I'd hidden. Same tone, same shimmer. My stomach tightened, but I didn't cry. No tears, just facts. I bagged the shirt and put it away in the back of the closet. If he wanted to play games, I'd play better. No outbursts, no yelling. That's what they expect. Emotional chaos. But I was past that. I wanted him to feel safe, unbothered, maybe even smug. That's when they slip. I started checking his calendar, his call logs, even his gas receipts. He wasn't covering his tracks well. Thursday night meetings that ended too late for a quick dinner, but not late enough for exhaustion. Saturday errands that took 3 hours and came back with nothing but a bottle of wine and an empty smile. And through it all, I smiled too. Sweet, steady. The picture of a loving wife. But inside, I was already cooking something far more satisfying than dinner. I started testing little things. Nothing major, just nudges. I asked if he wanted to do a date night, watched him hesitate. I brought up an old friend of mine just to see if he'd mention this AM woman by accident. But he didn't flinch. He was too polished now, too rehearsed. The charm had returned. The smiles, the casual hand on my back as he passed by in the kitchen. Almost like he was trying to remind me how lucky I was. But I wasn't fooled. I was fascinated. The better he played the doting husband, the more I knew something was rotting underneath. And that rot had a name. I could feel it. He was hiding someone, and she didn't even know I existed yet. That's when it hit me. If he was lying to both of us, maybe it was time we met. But not in the way he'd expect. I stood in front of the mirror that evening, holding the lipstick like a key. I wasn't going to scream into the void or beg for truth. No, I was going to rewrite the script entirely. If Ethan wanted a performance, I'd give him one he'd never forget. And the first step? Figuring out exactly who AM really was. I didn't pull away. I leaned in. Hard. I became the kind of wife men brag about in office break rooms. Packed lunches with handwritten notes. Morning texts that said, "Thinking of you," with a heart emoji. I even complimented the shirts that still smelled like lies. And he lapped it up. Every smile I gave him felt like a little test. And he kept passing, convinced I was blind. He started relaxing again, like the air around him had cleared. The late nights returned, but so did the casual kisses. He laughed more, touched me more, probably thinking whatever distance had been between us had simply vanished. And maybe that's what made it all so delicious, knowing he thought he'd gotten away with it. That I was the same woman waiting by the door with a glass of wine and no questions. But behind the scenes, I was working. Quietly. Carefully. I booked a salon appointment under the name AM, just to see if anyone would blink. I created a fake profile with a different name, different face. Nothing flashy, just someone his type might follow. I started watching the women he liked, followed, interacted with. One stood out, beautiful, flirty, and very proud of her selfies, especially the ones taken in a car that looked a little too familiar. Her name was Ariana Morris, mid-30s, gorgeous but not in a polished way, more like she'd roll her eyes at compliments and still know exactly the effect she had. Her profile was public, which made things easier. I scrolled through her feed like I was flipping pages of a book I hadn't meant to open, but couldn't put down. And there it was, a photo of her in a passenger seat. Burgundy leather, same dash, same mirror charm Ethan bought in college. I zoomed in. No denying it. That was our car? My car, technically, the one I drove when he borrowed it for errands. She captioned it with something stupid like, "When Fridays feel like magic." I stared at the image for a long time, wondering if she knew. If she even cared, but judging by her smile, she didn't know I existed. Or worse, she knew and didn't see me as a threat. I checked her posts for patterns, time of day, locations, which ones he liked. I even traced back old check-ins to see if they overlapped with his supposed late meetings. They did. The timeline lined up like a puzzle he never thought I'd solve. And with every new detail I uncovered, the anger inside me simmered. Not explosive, not wild, just focused, measured. The kind of anger that plans things with linen napkins and candlelight. I started rehearsing the way I'd look at him, the way my hand would rest lightly on his, just like always. The small pauses in my sentences, carefully timed to seem adoring, not suspicious. I gave him no reason to question me, not even for a second. That was the key, to stay soft on the outside, while sharpening every instinct I had on the inside. He couldn't know I'd already found her. He couldn't suspect I'd been planning a meeting. I even played into his ego, told him he seemed lighter lately, more relaxed. He grinned, said work had been finally manageable again. I smiled right back, holding his gaze like I still believed every word he said, but inside I was already building the evening, the menu, the wine, the dress I'd wear. And I knew exactly how it would unfold. He'd come home to the scent of rosemary and garlic, expecting affection. He'd get something else entirely. I waited until everything was perfectly in place. The fake message sent from his phone to Ariana. The time, the date, the address, no detail left to chance. Because if he was going to lie to both of us, then the least I could do was set the table for the truth. And soon, very soon, they'd both be seated. I told him he deserved a special night. Just the two of us. "You've been working so hard," I said with a smile. "Let me spoil you a little." He looked surprised, flattered even. The kind of reaction that tells you everything about where their guilt sits. I lit the candles, set the table with the good dishes we only use for anniversaries, cooked every bite from scratch. His favorite meal, down to the garlic butter on the bread. He walked through the door like a man returning to safety. I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek, a glass of wine, and the softest version of my voice. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. He relaxed into the evening like it was exactly what he needed, and in a way, I guess it was, just not the way he thought. He asked what the occasion was. I shrugged. Love doesn't need a reason, right? He bought every second of it. Sat down, commented on the music. "You really went all out," he said, slicing into his food with a grin. I laughed lightly. "Of course, tonight's important." And just as he reached for his drink, right on cue, the doorbell rang. He froze, fork in midair. Are you expecting someone? He asked. No, I said, with a smile so gentle it could cut glass. But you are. He stood slowly, almost like his body was moving before his brain could catch up. I watched his back as he walked to the door, shoulders tightening, hesitation in every step. He opened it, and there she was, Ariana, in a fitted black dress, holding her purse with a confused little smile. Hey, she said softly. You told me to come. You said you wanted me to meet someone. Her voice trailed off the second she saw me. I stayed seated, calm, composed, my wine glass in hand, the candlelight catching the rim just right. Ariana blinked, glanced back at Ethan, then back at me. Her eyes widened as the puzzle pieces snapped into place. You must be Victoria, she said, voice tightening. I nodded. And you must be AM. I motioned to the empty chair across from me. I saved you a seat. I figured since you two share a car, you might as well share a meal. Ethan's face was a masterpiece of panic. He looked from me to her and back again, his mouth opening, then closing, like a fish pulled from water. This isn't what it looks like, he finally stammered. I tilted my head. Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like. My tone was soft, too soft, that kind of quiet that unsettles a man more than screaming ever could. I gestured to the wine. Join us, Ethan. I wouldn't want you to miss your big moment. Ariana didn't sit. She stood frozen by the door, eyes darting between us, breathing shallow. I could see it on her face. That slow, creeping horror of realizing she hadn't been special. Just a piece in a story she didn't know had a leading lady. She clutched her purse a little tighter. You never told me you were married, she whispered. Her voice cracked, but I didn't look at her. My eyes were locked on Ethan. He looked like he might throw up. Victoria, he began, but I raised a hand. Save it. You've said enough. To both of us. He tried to reach for me, some pathetic gesture of damage control. I leaned back in my chair. I just wanted to see her face, I said, still calm. To know who you thought was worth risking everything for. I turned to Ariana then, finally. Now you know too. Hope he was worth it. Without another word, she turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the tile like punctuation marks. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, alive. Ethan stood there, lips parted, but I was already rising from my chair. I reached into the drawer by the table, pulled out a folder, and slid it toward him. Dessert's off the menu tonight, I said, but I do have something sweet for you. He didn't touch the folder, just stared at it like it might catch fire. Inside were the divorce papers, already signed on my end. Clean, unapologetic. I didn't need a scene or an explanation, just closure. You'll need to vacate by the end of the week, I said calmly as I started collecting the plates. The lease is in my name, utilities too. I've already spoken to the landlord. He looked stunned, like he'd just realized the game was over and he wasn't holding any cards. He opened his mouth, probably to beg or lie or blame stress, they always do, but I didn't give him the space. Don't, I said, not harshly, just final. You made choices, and now you get to live with them. He tried to follow me into the kitchen, but I stopped him with just a glance. That was all it took now. One look. Because the power had shifted, and we both knew it. Later that night, I heard him crying in the guest room. I didn't flinch. Not out of cruelty, just peace. The kind of peace that comes when a storm finally stops pretending it's just rain. I sipped my tea, turned the page of my book, and let the silence wash over me like a baptism. I was no longer the woman waiting for his attention. I was the woman who'd taken her life back and set it gently on fire to keep herself warm. The next morning, I changed the locks, not out of spite, out of necessity. I needed to reclaim every inch of space he'd polluted with lies. I boxed up his things with the same care I once folded his shirts. Labels, neat piles, taped shut. I didn't smash anything, didn't burn a single photo. I wasn't erasing the past. I was simply refusing to let it weigh me down. And every box by the door felt like a small exhale I'd been holding for years. I blocked his number after he sent the 6th message in 2 hours. Long apologies, old photos, half-written memories meant to make me soften. But I didn't soften. I'd done enough soft. I left the messages unread, deleted his contact, and turned my phone face down. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean, untouched. It felt like the first white page of a brand new book, and for once I didn't need anyone else to help me write it. In the days that followed, I didn't cry, I didn't drink, I didn't spiral. I made my coffee each morning, walked barefoot through the living room, opened the windows wide. The air felt lighter. The mirrors looked kinder. There was no one left to perform for, no one to second guess. I had given him every chance to be honest, and he chose secrets. So, I chose myself. A few weeks later, I took the car for a long drive, the same one he used to borrow when he said he needed space. Only this time, the seats were clean. The glove compartment was organized, and inside, I placed a single lipstick. Mine. A soft mauve with my initials carved into the gold cap. Not a message to him, just a reminder to myself. That I could take back what was mine, piece by piece. That I was no longer in the passenger seat of my own life. I pulled over at our favorite overlook. Or at least, it used to be. Watched the sky stretch wide and unapologetic, just like I wanted to be. I took a breath, deep and full, without the weight of wondering who he was texting or what excuse I'd be fed next. There was nothing left to uncover. No more lies hiding in plain sight. Only the quiet hum of freedom and the strange beauty of a chapter finally closed. As I turned the key in the ignition, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked steady. My mouth? Almost smiling. I leaned back in the seat and whispered, "If you leave proof of your betrayal, I'll leave a mark you'll never forget." Then I drove off, not running, not escaping, just moving forward with both hands on the wheel.
Here. That was the voicemail waiting for me on a quiet Tuesday morning. No hello, no explanation, just that. My father's voice, once comforting when I was little, now sharp, calculated, and ice cold. I played it twice, not because I didn't hear it right, but because I couldn't believe it was real. I stood in my kitchen, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, blinking at the phone screen like maybe it would change its mind. But there it was, plain and brutal. One voicemail, 7 seconds, a lifetime of cracks finally shattering. 10 minutes later, another message came in, this time from my mom. "You've really done it now," she said. I could hear the smirk in her voice. That smug tone she always used when she thought she'd won. "Now you've lost everything." No context, no reason, no kindness, just that sentence. Cold, dismissive, final. I didn't argue. I didn't ask what I had apparently done. I didn't even bother defending myself. I just typed 2 words into the group chat we used for family plans. Understood. And I hit send. That was it. No exclamation mark. No explanation. I kept it short because, honestly, what else was there to say? This was how they treated me, their daughter. The one who co-signed their mortgage. The one who paid half their utilities when things got tight. The one who loaned my brother 10 grand and never got a thank you. The one who canceled trips, dreams, and even dates to show up and help them because family meant something to me. But apparently it didn't mean the same to them. There was no fight, no betrayal on my part, no secret sin to justify this ambush. Just quiet resentment that must have been growing under their roof until it boiled over into that voicemail, into that smirk. My mom's face flashed in my mind, perfectly powdered, sipping wine at last year's Christmas dinner while I scrubbed dishes in her kitchen. And now she had the nerve to say I'd lost everything? I didn't feel anger yet, just blank. But something inside me whispered, you didn't lose everything. You're just about to realize what you still have. Understood. It was the most controlled lie I'd ever typed. Because inside I didn't understand a damn thing. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at that one-word text glowing on the screen as if it had a heartbeat of its own. My thumbs hovered there for a long time before I finally put the phone down. My chest was tight like I'd been holding my breath for years and didn't even realize it. I was trying so hard not to cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because part of me still couldn't believe they meant it. That this wasn't just another one of my mom's manipulative games, or my dad's passive-aggressive punishment disguised as tough love. But this time it felt different. It felt final. A lawyer? Over Christmas? It was like they couldn't just reject me quietly. They had to make it official. And the worst part? I still wanted to believe I'd wake up and they'd say it was a joke. That maybe they were just angry. That maybe I'd done something without realizing. I replayed every recent conversation, every text, every moment I could remember, trying to trace the fault line that had cracked open. But there wasn't one. Not really. Just years of me carrying the emotional and financial load for everyone. I was always the responsible one. That was my label. Samantha, the fixer. The calm one. The reliable daughter who never said no. The one who helped with mortgage payments when my parents were between jobs. The one who drove 4 hours to watch my brother's kids when he had an emergency. The one who sent money for birthdays, for bills, for little things that added up to more than I ever spent on myself. And I never asked for anything back, because I thought that's what family did. I thought that being the dependable one meant I mattered. But maybe it just meant I was easier to exploit. Maybe the real reason I was so calm in that message wasn't because I was strong, but because I was numb. There's a kind of heartbreak that's so quiet, it doesn't scream or break dishes. It just sits there, heavy, patient. And now, that weight had finally become too much. I didn't want to be the girl who begged for love, who asked her parents, "Why are you doing this to me?" and got silence in return. So instead, I said the only thing I could muster. Understood. But no, I wasn't okay. Not even close. And yet, somewhere deep beneath the ache, something was shifting. Something I couldn't name yet. It didn't feel like revenge. Not even anger. It felt like a door had closed. And maybe, just maybe, I was the one who would walk away for good this time. As I stared at the screen of my phone, I couldn't help but drift back in time to every little moment that had led to this. Every subtle shift, every unspoken rule. It wasn't just today. It was the culmination of years of being the backup daughter. Growing up, my brother always had their attention. He was the golden child, the one with the potential, the one who could do no wrong. And no matter how hard I tried to show them that I was just as capable, just as deserving of their love, I was always the one who had to pick up the pieces. I could still hear my mother's voice ringing in my ears. "Samantha, can you just co-sign the house for your brother? He's struggling with the down payment, but you're the responsible one. You'll make it work, won't you?" "I'll make it work, won't you?" Of course I did. Because what was I supposed to say? No, I didn't even have the heart to refuse. He was my brother. They were my parents. And somehow I convinced myself that this was just what family did. They leaned on you and you didn't complain. But the problem with always being the fixer is that you never get fixed yourself. There was no room for my own dreams, my own goals, when every conversation seemed to revolve around someone else's problems. The house, the car, the bills. Always something I had to save. I remember the time when we were sitting around the dinner table. My mom casually brought up my brother's career troubles again. She sighed dramatically and glanced at me. "Samantha, you know your brother could have gone further if he'd had your work ethic. But he's just, I don't know. He's trying, but he's not as dependable as you. Thank God for you." I'd smiled back, a tight smile, the kind you give when you're trying to swallow a lump in your throat. I didn't even protest anymore. Not when I knew they didn't expect me to be anything but good, anything but the reliable one. It was easier to just nod and accept my role. But what did it ever get me? I was the one who handled all the financial pressure, who worked overtime, who loaned money, who showed up and quietly disappeared into the background when the spotlight was on someone else. And it wasn't just money. It was the emotional weight, too. I'd watched as my brother and his wife got endless attention from our parents. Their birthdays, their anniversaries, their struggles, their successes. Meanwhile, my accomplishments were met with silence or fleeting praise. I'd gotten into a prestigious college, but instead of celebrating me, they asked, "Do you think you'll be able to help us out more once you graduate?" When I launched my business, they barely acknowledged it. I didn't realize it at the time, but that's when the cracks started to form. That's when the slow betrayal of my trust began. I kept pushing it aside, thinking maybe I was imagining it, that maybe I was being overly sensitive. But now, sitting here, the truth was undeniable. They had been taking from me emotionally and financially for years, and I had let them. And now they were gone. Gone, until they needed me again. I walked into the bank with a steady breath, my hands cold against the leather of my purse. The high, polished ceilings, the soft murmur of quiet conversations, the reassuring hum of daily business. It all felt surreal, like I was moving through someone else's life. The tellers were smiling, greeting the people coming and going. But inside, my heart was a storm. It had taken so much to get to this point, so much strength that I didn't even know I had. But the decision had already been made. I was done. I approached the counter, greeted with the same polite smile. "How can I help you today?" "I need to speak to someone about removing my name from a mortgage," I said, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. The teller didn't question me. This was standard business. She nodded and directed me to the private office at the back of the bank. It was a small, quiet room with a large desk and a computer. Everything about it was sterile, everything except for the decisions that were about to be made in this space. I sat across from a woman in her 30s, her glasses perched low on her nose as she clicked away on the keyboard. I felt a cold rush of anxiety in my chest, but I squashed it. I had done the research. I knew exactly what I needed to do, and I would do it. "I'm here to remove my name from the mortgage," I repeated, watching the woman carefully. Her gaze flickered up from the screen, as if she didn't fully understand the gravity of my request. "You're sure about this? It's a significant amount. $320,000 is no small sum, miss." She glanced at the paperwork. "Samantha!" "I'm sure," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I've made the decision." The paperwork was a blur of words and signatures. I didn't need to read it over. It was all legal. And as I scrawled my signature, a sense of quiet finality settled over me. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone anymore. Not my parents, not anyone. The weight of the $320,000 mortgage had been on my shoulders for years, but in this moment, it felt like I was setting myself free. The woman printed out the forms and slid them across the desk, but I barely registered the words on the page. I could already imagine my parents' faces when they realized what I had done. The shock, the panic, but they wouldn't understand. This wasn't an act of vengeance. It wasn't about making them suffer. It was simply me saying no. No to their manipulation. No to the years of being the backup daughter, the one who picked up all their slack. No to the lie that I owed them anything more than what they'd already taken from me. "Everything is processed," the woman said, smiling. "You're all set." I stood up, my hands steady as I took the documents and tucked them into my bag. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I simply felt done. I turned and walked out of the bank, my footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. Outside, the world was busy, unaware of the quiet storm I'd just set in motion. But inside, I was calm. It was done. And now I was free. 2 days passed in a quiet, almost eerie silence. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't glued to my phone, nervously checking for messages, anticipating the next crisis. I was at peace, and it felt foreign but comforting, like a weight lifting off my chest. But all of that changed the moment I picked up my phone again. I had a total of 67 missed calls. 67. Each one was from either my mother, my father, or my brother. The notifications came in rapid succession, texts, voicemails, panic-laced questions that were left unanswered. I scrolled through them, the messages getting more desperate, more frantic with each new one. "Where are you?" came one from my brother. "This is urgent. Call me back." The next was from my mother. "Why are you doing this? Pick up the phone, Samantha. We need you. Then another voicemail from my dad. The same message, each time with a little more strain. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is going to ruin everything. Call me. I let the phone sit in my hand, the vibrations of each call pulsing against my palm. There was a time when I would have picked up immediately, tried to smooth things over, reassured them that I wasn't abandoning them, that I would help. But not now. Now I was just silent. But then came the message that really got to me, the one that wasn't from family but from their lawyer. Samantha, we need your signature to proceed with the refinancing of the house. Without it, the entire deal falls through. Please contact us immediately. I read it twice, slowly. It was exactly what I expected, and I could almost hear the panic in his voice through the words. They had no idea what to do without me. For so long I had been their lifeline, the safety net, the one who always fixed everything, the one who always said yes, even when I was suffocating under the pressure. But now they were facing the consequences of my absence, and it was crushing them. I didn't respond. Not a single word. No text. No voicemail. Nothing. The silence between us became a weapon, and it felt more satisfying than anything I had ever done before. It wasn't out of anger, though. It was simply the consequence of years of being their backup plan. I didn't owe them explanations. I didn't need to explain why I was done. They had used me for too long, and now they had to face the reality of what their actions had cost them. I set the phone down, the screen flashing with more incoming messages. But it didn't matter. For once, the ball was in my court, and I wasn't picking up. It's strange, isn't it? How you can pour so much of yourself into something, give everything, your time, your energy, your money, only for people to look at you like you're disposable when they no longer need you. That's how it felt with my parents, my family. They built everything on my back, my sacrifices, and my blind loyalty. And when I finally drew a line in the sand, when I said enough, they tried to erase me, as if I never mattered, as if all the years I spent being their safe bet had meant nothing. But that's the truth, isn't it? To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was an insurance policy, the one they called on when things got tough, the one who never said no, the one who always made everything work out, even when I was running on empty. It was never about love. Not really. It was about what I could give. And I gave. I gave more than I ever should have. I gave up my savings. I co-signed that $320,000 mortgage, knowing full well that the burden would fall on me when things got tough. I sacrificed years of my own financial stability to make sure they were comfortable, never thinking to ask, what about me? And when I couldn't anymore, when I finally realized that I wasn't their savior, I was just their tool, their crutch, their backup, that's when everything changed. But here's the thing they didn't expect. I didn't need them to fix it. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need them to come to their senses and apologize. I needed none of it. I had already started moving on, quietly, without fanfare, without drama. I watched as their world started to crumble, as their lawyer began calling and the pressure mounted. My mother's carefully crafted image of being the perfect, well-put-together matriarch was slowly peeling away. My father, the man who had always been so sure of his control, was losing his grip. The chaos they had created started to unravel. And me? I was thriving. Not out of malice, not out of revenge, but because for the first time in my life, I was living for myself. I didn't have to constantly worry about their messes, their crises, their drama. I wasn't responsible for their bad decisions anymore. I was free. I focused on my own life. I picked up the pieces of my own dreams that I'd set aside for so long. I started a new business, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the time for. I nurtured my own growth, my own peace. And it felt right. I wasn't perfect. I still had doubts, moments of guilt. But when I looked at the life I was building, outside the shadow of my parents' expectations, I knew I had made the right choice. They had expected me to buckle, to feel sorry for them, to come crawling back when the dust settled. But I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. I was done. And that, in itself, felt like the sweetest victory. The phone rang late that afternoon, a familiar number. My father's number. I stared at the screen, not sure what I was expecting. His voice, his apology, his plea for me to come back and fix everything. That's what I assumed was coming. The same old routine, the same manipulative tactics. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't in a hurry to answer. I took a breath, stared at the missed calls, and eventually pressed accept. Samantha! My father's voice was soft yet urgent. We need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow? I'll come to you. I sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of his request settle. Why? So you can lecture me again? So you can guilt-trip me into coming back and doing everything for you? No, thanks. Please, just let's talk, he begged. I'm not asking for money, I'm asking for you. For the family. You know I can't fix this without you. I could feel his desperation in every word. My mind raced, but I kept my voice steady. Fine, we can talk. But this isn't about fixing anything. It's about accepting that everything has changed. We arranged a time. The next day, I prepared myself, not for the emotional outburst that I expected, but for something else entirely. When they arrived at my house, my father's face was drawn with worry, but there was something else behind his eyes. Guilt? Regret? Or maybe just the weight of his pride crumbling. My mother, on the other hand, was all smiles as if nothing had happened. She stood there, her usual facade of perfection in place. Samantha, sweetheart, my mother cooed. You've made such a big deal out of this. It's just money after all. Don't be so dramatic. I almost laughed. Almost. It wasn't even funny anymore. I stood up and walked toward the living room, motioning for them to sit down. I stayed standing, looking down at them like I was some kind of stranger. And in a way I wasn't their backup anymore. I wasn't their problem solver. Sit down. I'll make this quick, I said calmly. They both looked at each other, unsure. My father's eyes darted between me and my mother, waiting for her to step in, but she didn't. I wasn't the daughter they once knew, and it was clear to both of them now. You fired me, I said slowly, letting the words sink in. You've been doing it for years, using me, expecting me to come through every time you messed up. And I did. I gave. I co-signed that mortgage. I bailed you out. I picked up the pieces every time you asked. And you know what? I didn't get a thank you. Not even once. Not even a sorry. My mother shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable, but I pressed on. You never once thought about how much I sacrificed for you. You only cared about yourselves. And when I finally had enough and said no, you showed your true colors. You didn't apologize. You didn't try to understand. You just expected me to keep doing the same thing I've always done. But here's the thing. I'm not your safety net anymore. My father was silent, his face red, but there was nothing he could say that would change anything now. My mother, on the other hand, looked at me, her eyes cold. Fine, I said, my voice unwavering. I just accepted the termination. I'm done. The silence hung heavy in the air as I let the truth sit between us. There were no tears, no arguments, no dramatics, just cold, hard reality. You wanted me to fix everything? Well, I'm not going to, and you'll have to learn to live with that. I turned and walked away from them, out of that suffocating room and into my future. The future I had been building without them. It had been a year since everything had changed. A year since I let go of the weight that had been holding me down my entire life. A year since I finally said enough. Christmas rolled around again, and this time it felt different. I wasn't rushing around, trying to meet everyone's impossible expectations. I wasn't dealing with the strain of pretending to be someone's savior, always playing the role they wrote for me. Instead, I was sitting in my new apartment, the Christmas tree twinkling softly in the corner, the warm scent of cinnamon and pine filling the air. It was peaceful. It was mine. The apartment wasn't anything grand. It wasn't the mansion they had expected me to live in, the one they thought I should have. But to me, it was everything. It was freedom. It was choice. It was the first Christmas in years where I felt truly at home. I was surrounded by new friends, the people who actually cared about me, the ones who didn't see me as a safety net, but as a person. A woman. Not an ATM. Not a tool. But me. Samantha. The real me. They'd brought food, laughter, and love. There were no arguments, no tension, no expectation that I would fix everything for everyone. No looming threats of lawyers or accusations. Just joy. A family of my choosing, my own little corner of the world where I was appreciated for who I was, not what I could give. As I settled into the couch, sipping my wine and listening to the soft laughter around me, my phone buzzed. One glance at the screen told me exactly who it was, my mother. I couldn't help the small smile that crept across my face as I saw the message. She'd written, "Samantha, we know things have been difficult, but it's Christmas. Please, could you help us? We need a holiday miracle." I stared at the screen for a moment, the words weighing nothing more than empty promises that had filled my life for years. I felt no anger, no resentment. I simply felt calm, and maybe just a little sad for them, for how they would never understand what they had lost. The old me would have felt guilty. I would have debated calling her back, trying to fix things again, bending over backward to make them happy. But not this time. This time, I knew that the love I had been giving them for so long had never been reciprocated. I knew my worth. I didn't need them to validate me anymore. Instead, I smiled, not in anger or pride, but in peace. I set the phone down without replying and let the message fade into the background. I looked around at the people I was surrounded by, people who chose me, and I realized that I had everything I needed. I had my peace, my independence, and the love that was truly unconditional, the love I had been craving for so long. I gave myself the holiday miracle I had spent my entire life looking for. I didn't need them to come around, to suddenly get it, to apologize. I was enough. I always had been. So I turned my attention back to the people in the room, letting their laughter fill the air, the sound of joy and warmth surrounding me. And in that moment, I knew deep down I had made the right choice. Christmas would never be the same, but this time it was perfect, because I had given myself the greatest gift of all, peace. The mail in my hand trembling. It was a letter from my college, final notice. My tuition payment was overdue, and unless it was cleared within 5 business days, my enrollment would be frozen. I blinked, confused, my heart thudding hard against my ribs. That didn't make sense. I had $4,200 saved. My college fund. Every penny I'd earned from babysitting, working retail on weekends, and that one summer internship I landed after sending out 50 resumes. I rushed to my room, opened the banking app. My breath caught. 0 balance. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Maybe I used the wrong account. But when I looked through the transaction history, my stomach dropped. Multiple purchases at high-end stores. Louis Vuitton, Sephora, Apple. Thousands drained in days. I stormed into the living room, my voice shaking. "Where's my tuition money?" My mom didn't look up from her phone. "We used it," she said, casually like she was commenting on the weather. I couldn't breathe. "Used it? For what?" "For your sister," she replied flatly, finally glancing at me. She needed new clothes and a phone for her birthday. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "You spent my college fund for her shopping spree?" "She deserved it more than you," she said, tilting her head slightly. "You're always so serious about school. Maybe this will help you relax." My dad walked in right then, nodded without shame. "You're always responsible, Chloe. You'll figure something out. Your sister needed a little joy." A little joy? They stole my future to give her a few selfies and handbags. My throat burned, but I couldn't even form a sentence. And then came the final punch. My sister walked by, flaunting her new heels, smirking. "Thanks for the early birthday gift," she said and winked. I stood there, frozen, like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. These were the people I had trusted, loved, sacrificed for, and they'd chosen her again. Not just with words, but with my life. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Quietly, permanently. It wasn't just the $4,200. It wasn't just the shopping bags or the birthday. That moment in the living room, that cold, casual dismissal, was the final confirmation of something I'd been trying not to believe for years. I was never the daughter they chose. I was the daughter they used. Growing up, I had always been the dependable one. The quiet one. While my sister, Ava, had glitter in her hair and fire in her voice, I had books in my bag and lists in my planner. I stayed home to help with chores while she went to parties. I gave up ballet lessons because Ava's gymnastic fees doubled. When the family car broke down one summer, they sold my guitar to help fix it without even telling me. "You're strong," Mom would say. "Ava needs more support." Dad always nodded in agreement, as if it was some unspoken truth that I didn't get to have needs, just strength. When Ava didn't get into her top college, they threw her a cheer-up vacation to Cancun. When I made Dean's List, they said, "That's what we expect from you, Chloe." I remember one Christmas when I saved up for months to buy my parents a coffee machine. Ava got them a keychain she picked up from the mall last minute. Guess whose gift they opened first? Whose they praised? There was always this unspoken equation in our house. Ava equals adored. Chloe equals available. They leaned on me when bills were tight, when emotions ran high, when things needed fixing. I was the steady one, the fixer, the background player in my own family story. And every time they took from me, my time, my savings, my peace, I told myself it was just what you do for family, that someday they'd see me. But they never did. The tuition money was the clearest signal. Not a mistake, not a slip. It was a pattern so old it had its own rhythm. And this time, the damage couldn't be hidden behind fake gratitude or gaslighting. They didn't even ask. They just decided I didn't need my education as much as Ava needed a designer purse. That I'd figured out because I always had. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the silence around me louder than ever. I thought about every time I'd said no to myself so they could say yes to her. I wasn't jealous. I was exhausted. Being the backup daughter had a cost. And for once, I wasn't willing to pay it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask why. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. They had shown me who I was to them, and I finally believed them. So I went to my room, shut the door softly, and sat on the edge of my bed. Everything around me looked the same. The bookshelf stacked with textbooks I paid for, the chipped desk where I planned my future, the corkboard full of scholarships I applied to by myself. It all suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone who had been waiting for approval that was never coming. I opened my closet and pulled out the duffel bag I used when I stayed on campus during orientation week. I began folding clothes, jeans, sweatshirts, a few button-downs, like I was preparing for a trip I didn't know I was taking until just now. No one knocked. No one asked what I was doing. No one cared. I wasn't surprised. When I zipped up the bag, the sound was deafening. It sliced through the silence like a statement. I'm done. I walked back down the stairs slowly. My mom was watching some reality show, feet up on the coffee table, sipping from a wine glass. Ava was still scrolling through her phone, probably texting friends about the new shoes Mom bought her with my tuition. I stood at the edge of the living room, duffel slung over my shoulder. "I'm heading out," I said quietly. Mom looked over, not with worry, but with annoyance. "What's with the attitude?" I didn't answer that. I just gave her a small nod. "Thanks for everything." It wasn't gratitude. It was closure. Dad looked up from his laptop. "You being dramatic again?" I ignored him. No goodbye from Ava. She didn't even look up. I walked out the front door, the hinges creaking behind me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Outside, the air was cold, sharper than I expected. It filled my lungs with something I hadn't felt in a long time, breath. As I walked down the street, my heart pounded, not from panic, but from something quieter and deeper. Grief. Fear. But underneath it all, something was cracking open. A strange calm. A whisper I had ignored for years was getting louder. You don't belong there anymore. That house was never home. That family was never safe. I had been surviving inside their world of conditions, expectations, and emotional hand-me-downs. Now I was walking out of it, not to punish them, but to finally choose me. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but for the first time, I knew who I wasn't going to be anymore. The first few days were the hardest. I had moved in with Sarah, a friend from my college orientation. She had a small apartment near campus, and even though it wasn't much, it felt like freedom. Still, the quiet sting of betrayal hung heavy in the air, especially when I thought about how easily they'd taken what was mine. The $4,200, my future, had vanished without a second thought, and it left me feeling hollow. But I wasn't going to let myself drown in bitterness. I refused. I wasn't going to waste my energy on regret, anger, or revenge. That was petty. What I needed was control, and control would come in silence. It was time to take back everything I had lost. My first step was simple: sever all financial ties. They didn't deserve access to a single cent of mine anymore. I sat at the small desk in Sarah's apartment, surrounded by stacks of textbooks I was too tired to read, and I pulled up my bank account on my laptop. The digital world was quieter than it had ever been before. There, in front of me, was the lingering reminder of my parents' trust in me, the shared accounts, the credit cards they had co-signed, all the strings they had attached to me, pulling me back when I tried to move forward. With shaky hands, I changed the passwords, revoked their access, and removed their names from every account that had ever tied me to them. I didn't care if they screamed, they came running. This was mine, not theirs. Then I made the decision I had been putting off for weeks. I blocked their contact information. I didn't need the guilt. I didn't need the shame they were always trying to pin on me. If they wanted to reach me, they'd have to find another way, but I wasn't about to make it easy for them. I thought back to all the times I had been told, "You're the responsible one, Chloe," as if that was a compliment, as if that didn't mean you're the one we can always count on to clean up the mess. But this wasn't just about cleaning up anymore. This was about building something they could never tear down. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning. I dove into my college scholarship search, spending late nights writing essays, contacting professors, looking for anything that could relieve the financial burden. And then I picked up a side hustle, tutoring, babysitting, anything that paid. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The more I worked, the more I started to see a different kind of future. One where I didn't rely on them, one where I wasn't constantly expected to carry the weight of their expectations. I wasn't being petty. I wasn't punishing them. I was simply building what I should have had all along. For the first time, I could see a path forward, and it was quiet. It was methodical, and it was mine. In those moments, I realized something crucial. They had taken my tuition fund, but they couldn't take my drive. They could try to break me, but they couldn't break my determination. That quiet power was starting to build within me, and it felt stronger than any rage or regret. And I wasn't stopping. Every time I scrolled through my social media, it felt like I was choking on a bitter pill. There she was, my sister, Ava, smiling into the camera, her arms draped over the newest designer bag, a gift from Mom. Another shopping spree, another expensive, shiny object she didn't need. Each post seemed to mock me, a reminder of the money that should have been mine, the future I should have been able to build without strings attached. But there was something in me now, a flicker at first, of something other than bitterness. A decision to stop letting her and them have that hold over me. I didn't respond to her posts. I didn't comment. Instead, I woke up early every morning before the sun and hit the books, pages turning with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. I spent hours poring over finance texts, scribbling notes for my next big paper, and building up a network of peers and professors who saw the drive in me, who could see past the mess that had once defined me. And in the quiet of my little rented room, I found something that Ava would never understand: peace. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about showing them I could survive without them. It was about what I was building inside myself, what I was becoming. I was done being the backup daughter, the one who gave everything and got nothing but guilt in return. I was becoming someone who could stand tall, who didn't need their approval or their endless demands. One day, during office hours, I ran into Professor Hamilton, a no-nonsense economics professor who had been one of the few to genuinely notice me. I had reached out for advice about a research project, and it had turned into a conversation about my future. "You've got something about you," he said, his eyes piercing through the casual veneer I had perfected. "I've seen students struggle with their finances, their family situations. But you don't just want to survive. You want to do something with your life. You want to create." It was the first time in months that someone had believed in me, truly believed in my potential without a motive. Not a parent who saw me as a financial safety net, not a sister who saw me as competition, just a man who recognized my will to rise. Professor Hamilton helped me land an internship at a financial consulting firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the first real break I had gotten. I learned the ropes of investment strategies and business models, things I had once only dreamt of understanding. The work was hard, long, and tedious, but it gave me a new sense of worth. I was no longer just the responsible one. I was the one in control of my destiny. As Ava continued to post photos of her new bags and shoes, I was learning how to create spreadsheets that could help me manage my future, not my parents' whims. Each day spent working on my goals felt like a new stitch in a quilt that I was weaving piece by piece from scratch. And with each small success, I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer that little girl who had been used for her good grades and reliable nature. I was becoming something they would never expect. I was becoming me. It had been almost a year since I'd cut ties with my family, a year of building my life on my own terms. Every day felt like a new victory, no matter how small. The freedom I had carved out for myself was sweet, and the quiet was more beautiful than I ever expected. But when the call came, I should have known the storm was brewing. It started with a notification, a simple alert from my bank. Your recent transaction was declined. Please review your account. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was an error. But when I checked the details, my heart dropped. There it was, a charge to my credit card, one I hadn't made. Someone had tried to make a large purchase. Someone I knew very well. I stared at the screen, a sick feeling settling in my stomach. The name on the transaction was familiar. It was my mother. She had used my credit card, the one I had painstakingly blocked from their access, trying to buy another high-end purse for my sister. The nerve. The audacity. I immediately called my bank, and they confirmed it. The charge was reversed, and my account had been locked. There was no way they could process the payment. That was when I knew. They hadn't learned. They hadn't changed. And now they were in for a rude awakening. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a flood of frantic messages. Mom, why was my card declined? I need to speak to you. Now. Dad, what did you do? This is your responsibility. You owe us. Ava, Chloe, why are you making this difficult? You've always been the reliable one. Help. I sat there, staring at their texts, feeling nothing. They had no idea what they were up against. I had learned to build something from nothing, and now they wanted to lean on me again. They thought they could just pick up where they left off, as though I were still that daughter who always caved in. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a deep breath and took the next step. I logged into my bank account one last time and did something they would never expect. I froze every single link they had to my financials. No more shared cards. No more loans under my name. Not a single thread of connection. The next thing I did was call my lawyer. My parents had crossed the line, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. We drafted a formal letter explaining that any further attempts to misuse my name or financial resources would result in legal action. I could already hear the chaos beginning on the other end. Mom, what the hell is going on? Why would you cut us off like this? Dad, you're breaking this family apart. We gave you everything. Ava, I can't believe you're doing this to me. You know I don't have money like you. You're selfish. The messages became more desperate, frantic, and full of guilt. But this time I didn't feel the pull. I wasn't the backup daughter anymore. I wasn't the one they could manipulate into fixing their mess. I let their messages sit in my inbox untouched. They weren't just angry because of a credit card being declined. They were panicking because they realized they had lost their grip on me. And I wasn't coming back. The phone rang, a sound I had come to dread over the past year. It was a number I had blocked. But somehow, I knew this would be different. I stared at the screen for a moment before finally pressing answer. Chloe. My mom's voice cracked through the line, raw with emotion. Please, baby, just listen to me. We didn't mean to hurt you. You have to understand. Her sobs were loud, desperate. I didn't say anything for a while. Just let the silence stretch between us. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't forgiving either. Not yet. You've been silent for so long, she continued, her voice trembling. Your father and I are scared. We don't know what to do. We never meant for things to go this far. Please come back. You're the only one who can help us. The words stung, but I didn't let them affect me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I could finally lay it all out, the truth they had been avoiding for years. You never meant to hurt me? I repeated softly, my voice devoid of anger. Mom, you used my future to fund your shopping sprees. You took everything I had saved, every penny, and gave it to Ava. Then you and Dad acted like I should be grateful for the crumbs you left me. Do you remember the times I had to co-sign loans for the house? Or the way I had to bail you both out when things went wrong? I could hear her choking on her sobs, but I wasn't going to let her use it against me anymore. She had done it for years. Remember when I said I wanted to go to college? You told me it was too much of a stretch. You said it was more important for you to spend on Ava's birthday party than my tuition. How about the times I gave up my weekends to help pay bills or take care of things at home because Ava was busy with her friends? You let me do all the heavy lifting, all while pretending like I was the one who owed you. Her crying intensified, but I pressed on. You used me, I said simply, no emotion in my voice. You used my money, my time, and my spirit. And when I finally took a step back to protect myself, you called me selfish. I could hear my dad's voice in the background, muffled but persistent. Chloe, we're sorry. We need you. This is just a rough patch. Please help. No, Dad, I replied calmly. You don't get to use that excuse anymore. I've given enough. You don't deserve any more of my time or my support. My mom's voice faltered. Chloe, please don't do this. I can't lose you two. I'm not going anywhere, I said, finally feeling something close to peace. I'm just finally putting myself first. Something you've never let me do. You spent my support for years. Now I'm spending my peace. The call ended with a quiet, painful silence. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. They would never understand, but that didn't matter anymore. They had shown me time and time again that love for them had always been conditional, based on what I could give, what I could sacrifice. But I had learned something they would never grasp. Love for myself had to be unconditional. And that was all I needed now. It had been 2 years since that phone call. 2 years of silence. 2 years of living my life on my own terms. And in that time, so much had changed. I had graduated with honors, something I had once thought was a distant dream. My business had grown steadily, and it felt like for the first time, I was in control of my future. I was finally doing what I loved, and my career had taken off. The weight of always being the backup daughter, the one who sacrificed her dreams for everyone else, had lifted. Now I was living my dreams. It wasn't just the success that mattered, though. It was the peace, the mental clarity that came with not being tethered to a family that only saw me as a resource. But then the email came. It was from my mom with the subject line, Chloe, please, we need you. I opened it slowly, bracing myself for the same guilt trip I had heard so many times before. But this time there was something different in her tone, something almost desperate. Chloe, the email began, I know it's been a long time and I know I've hurt you. I can't tell you how sorry I am for what happened with your tuition and everything after that. Your dad and I are struggling. We've fallen behind on bills and we just can't keep up. Ava's still not working and we don't know where to turn. Please, we need your help. We don't know who else to turn to. I sat there, staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to feel anger. Part of me wanted to say, I told you so. But what I felt more than anything was a deep sadness, realization that they had never changed. They were still the same people who expected me to fix their messes without taking responsibility for their own actions. I took a deep breath and typed out a response, my fingers moving slowly across the keys as I chose my words carefully. Mom, I've forgiven you, I wrote. But I'm not your backup plan anymore. I've worked too hard to build my life, and I'm not going to undo all of that for you. I wish things were different. I wish you had seen me, truly seen me when I needed you the most. But I can't be the one who bails you out every time life gets tough. I've learned to take care of myself, and now it's your turn to do the same. I didn't send the email immediately. I sat there, reading my words over and over again. It felt like the end of something, but also the beginning of something new. I had learned to set boundaries to protect myself, and I was finally putting them into practice. When I did send it, I felt a strange sense of calm. They had spent years using me, thinking they could always lean on me. But I wasn't that person anymore. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from my dad. You don't understand. We're falling apart. I didn't respond. What I had once feared, that I would be alone, that I would be the one left out, was no longer a concern. I had built something far more valuable than what they ever expected. Independence, strength, a life of my own. And as I sat there, surrounded by the freedom I had fought for, I realized something even more profound. I didn't need them to complete me. I was whole on my own. The family they had thrown away, the one they had underestimated, had become the family they needed.